Welcome
Yeah.
to our program for the Indian Local Author Celebration here at the Norwalk Public Library. I wrote a book, now what? Hybrid Publishing, Christmas Lake Press. And I'd like to introduce Tom Pfeiffer and Mike Krishik.
Thank you. So, do we need the microphones, or can you all hear me? Yes, we need it? Okay. So I'm Tom Pfeiffer. I'm the publisher of Christmas Lake Press, and this is Mike Krishik. He is one of our authors. And Christmas Lake Press is what is called a hybrid publishing company, which I will explain to you in the course of the remarks. So you're probably all familiar with the pasta test. You know, you're cooking your pasta, you want to know if it's done, you take a noodle out, throw it against the wall. If it sticks, it's ready, and if it drops off the wall, then you have to cook it a little longer, right? So that is a perfect metaphor for what is now called traditional publishing. When I grew up and worked at Random House in the late 80s, it was just called publishing because there wasn't really any other type of publishing. So it was just the publishing industry. But now that there are other ways, many other ways to publish your books, companies like Random House, Penguin, it's now Penguin Random or Random Penguin or whatever it is, and they've tried to merge with Simon & Schuster, but that's been blocked. Those are called traditional publishing companies. What they do is they take a bunch of money that they have and they acquire from authors a bunch of books, and then they edit those books and typeset those books and print those books and ship them to bookstores and hope that they sell, just like kind of throwing the pasta against the wall and hoping that it sticks. It is a kind of a crazy business, which for a long time has been skewed towards the superstars, you know, Stephen King and John Grisham, and people who get huge advances for their books and sell millions of copies, and everyone else is sort of left in the dust. Or sent to the pulp mill, which is what actually happens with books that don't sell. There's a whole process. It goes to the bookstore. The publisher will actually take it back if it doesn't sell. Then it's what's called remaindered, which, you know, you get used books. You buy them from thrift books or wherever you buy your cheap books, and then eventually they get pulped and turned back into paper and recycled. So in traditional publishing, the publishing company takes pretty much all of the risk in terms of publishing a book because they're footing all the cost of creating it, and in some cases paying the author, advancing the author a little bit of money against potential earnings. And they also take pretty much all of the reward because traditional publishers pay what are called royalties to authors. And those royalties work as follows. 10% of the sale price on the first 5,000 copies sold, 12.5% on the next 5,000 copies, and 15% after that. Now, if you're John Grisham or Stephen King, you probably have a sweeter deal than that. But for everybody else, that's how it works. So if you have a $20 book, you get $2 a copy on the first 5,000 copies, and then $2.50, and then ultimately $3 after that. So it's for an author, it's pretty much no risk, no financial risk, but it's also low reward. And in addition to that, it's high barrier to entry. Traditional publishers rarely take books from authors who don't have an agent. And that would be a whole other panel, a whole other discussion about how to get an agent to represent you, who will take a portion of your sales and then try to get your book into the hands of an editor. So it's low risk, low reward, high barrier to entry. and long tail. It can take years and years for an author, an independent author, who's not well known, to get traction in that industry, whether it's to get an agent or to get your book noticed by anybody. On the other side of that, you have what used to be called vanity publishing. They were called vanity presses because someone who wanted to have a book, whether the book was any good or not, they wanted to get it printed up and have copies of it to give away or whatever they wanted to do with it. And people would pay a publisher, a vanity publisher, to print up those books. That's the inverse of traditional publishing. All the risk is on the author because you're footing the entire bill of getting the book created, plus the profit margin for the vanity press. But then you get all of the reward too. I mean, if you sell any copies, then that money would go to you. But you have no distribution of the books. The vanity press isn't going to do anything for you in terms of trying to get your book into bookstores or putting it up on Amazon or anything like that. That's all on you. Cohen, next to that, you now have what has pretty much replaced that, which is self-publishing. And the reason self-publishing has come into existence is that the tools of creating a book have become, in the last 20 years or so, vastly cheaper and vastly more accessible to all of you, all of us. Publishers have this, traditional publishers have this whole process where they have a staff of editors and copy editors, and they get a company to typeset the book, and then they get a printer to shoot film of the book and make plates and print it up, and it's a fairly complex process that when I started working in publishing, that was part of the education. You go to the printing press and you learn all the steps of this now fairly arcane process. But all those tools with the digital revolution have become accessible to you and me and all of us. So what happens now, if you want to publish your own book, is you write it. You might hire a freelance editor or somebody to look it over. You can hire somebody called a formatter, who's basically a typesetter, and they will take your manuscript and set it so that the pages look like book pages. Then you hire a cover designer who will create your cover. And then you take all that material, you upload it to Amazon's KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing Service. And once it's all approved, because all your trim sizes and everything, page count, everything looks right, you hit publish and you're an author. So that's really easy, relatively easy to do, although it's a bit of a process to manage because you have to hire your editor if you want one, you have to find the formatter, you have to find the cover designer, and you have to kind of oversee that whole process. And then of course you have to market and publicize your book because nobody is going to do that for you. So that is a little bit of risk, a little bit of money out of pocket, but certainly higher reward than traditional publishing. So given the wide differential between doing it yourself and handling everything yourself, or going to a traditional publisher and having them do everything for you, we now have something in the middle, which is called hybrid publishing. We're a cross between doing it yourself and having the traditional publisher do it for you. And naturally, since we're a cross between those two things, we're a cross between those two things economically as well. We don't take the lion's share of the sales the way a traditional publisher would. We don't take none of the sales the way a vanity press would, or if you're simply doing it yourself. We split, we share the cost of creating the book with the author. So if we take on an author, we oversee and manage and subcontract all of those processes that I was talking about. The editing of the book, in our case, we'll edit it myself. And by the way, my I'm the publisher at Christmas Lake Press. My editor-in-chief, Julia Bobkoff, is right there. She's going to come up after I'm done talking. So we'll edit the book. We will get it copy edited. Copy editing means checking it for errors and consistency and all of those things. We'll get it formatted. We'll get a cover designed that the author's happy with. And all of this, with lots of back and forth between publisher and author, because it's a truly collaborative process. We're not publishing just the book that we want, we're publishing the book that you want because you're the author. And then we upload that book to Amazon, and then we help to market and publicize the book in every way possible. Again, sharing that effort and that cost with the author. And then we share the profits from the sales of the book. Now, the nice thing about putting your book up on Amazon is that instead of getting a 10 or 12 or 15% royalty as you would from a traditional publisher, you get to keep 60% of your sale price of the book. Amazon takes 40 and they give you 60. But they do take out the manufacturing cost of the book. So if a $20 book costs $2 to make, they're going to take that $20, they're going to subtract out that $2 manufacturing cost, and then you're going to get 60% of what's left, and then that's split between the publisher and the author. This is another one of our authors, Cheryl Griffin. We have been working together on a book for several years, right?
I don't even want to count.
Julie, do you want to come up too? Why don't you take the...
Okay.
So we'll have our full complement of panelists here. And Cheryl is a great case to talk about here, because we met when I was teaching at the Westport Writers Workshop, and she had this book that she was working on that in class she would read to us from her phone, which is where it lived,
Yes.
right, for
Yes.
a long time. And there were chapters and snippets and pieces, and then I left the Writers Workshop, and I guess you did too, and a little bit, a year or two later, when Julia and I started Christmas Lake Press, I contacted her. First we started a Writers Workshop, then we turned it into a publishing company. I contacted Cheryl and I said, whatever happened with your book? And she said, well, I'm still working on it, right? So we've been going back and forth, editing, collaborating, refining for a couple of years now. We're getting ready to publish her book next year. Yeah, next year? Soon.
Yeah.
And then Mike is, another example. And there's a lot of creativity in hybrid publishing that you really can't have in either traditional, where sort of the rules are all set by a big company, by a billion-dollar company like Random House, or if you're doing it yourself, you're doing it yourself. So in Mike's case, Julia co-wrote the book with him. She's his co-author. And they sat together for many hours with Mike telling his story, which is quite amazing. It's amazing that he's here. It's amazing that he is sitting here on the stage, given what he's been through. So Julia co-wrote that with him, and then we published the book. And Julia will talk a little bit about this too. She has also written a film script for the book. And one of the things that we focus on at Christmas Lake Press is projects that have a potential to convert to the screen. So when we're editing the book and when we're looking at the story, we're shaping it and developing it in a way that we hope will translate well to the screen. And one of the reasons, the reason we're able to do that is because we have a professional screenwriter as our editor-in-chief. So before I turn it over to others, are there questions, since I kind of went through that pretty quickly, about the different types of publishing that I described and how those things work? Yes?
So how does one approach Christmas Lake, or you, if you have a book finished, would it send you a couple chapters?
So,
Email?
email, I'll give you my card. Email is fine. We'll look at a few, the first 3 chapters or so of the book. There is a form on our website where you can submit a file, but you don't have to do it that way. We're pretty casual, so anybody can email us a sample or even a synopsis of the book, and then we'll start a discussion, and we'll read your manuscript. It usually takes us about, depending on the length of the book, 2 or 3 weeks to take a look at it, and then we'll give you an answer, as to whether we think we might be able to work together.
What are your criteria for accepting a book? What percentage of the submissions that you get do you wind up accepting? And would you give us an idea of what your biggest success was in terms of sales?
Sure. So we focus primarily on fiction, on memoir. Again, those are 2 genres that will, can translate very well to film as well. We do some nonfiction, as well. The criteria really is that it seems simple to say it's a good book, but it's a good book. It's compelling. It has a message that we feel is important to put out into the world. The author has put his or her heart into the book, and that there's going to be an audience for it somewhere, and that's very subjective, I suppose. We probably take about half of what comes in at this point. We're not going to publish something that we don't believe in or that we don't think is well done, but we'll look at it and say, well, if it's sort of well done, but we think we can work together and make it well done, then that's an equation that could work for us.
That's okay, she can go.
Oh, okay.
As far as submitting, you have a website. I know a lot of these people have all these different people. You have to submit it to this one or that one. I was wondering if you had that complexity. And also, just because of what you require submitting, some people say just, the small query, a synopsis, or first 10 pages. I'm always concerned about safety, meaning copyright. I copyright everything, but is that also something you'd advise, or how do you handle all that?
So we're not complicated, because there are 2 employees, Julia and me, at this point, and a bunch of freelancers who copy edit and format and design covers and things like that. Once somebody sends us something, there's a dialogue that will go back and forth over that. We take copyright extremely seriously, and everyone should protect their work. If you're submitting to anybody, it's a good idea to put copyright, or the word copyright, or the copyright symbol, and the year and your name on every page of the manuscript when you submit it. Reputable publishers are not going to steal your work, because it's pretty much it's death in the industry if you're caught doing that. But it's always a good idea to copyright it. Back.
Can you give a rough idea of what the cost to the author would be?
Sure.
For about a 200-page novel, and what the turnaround time would be?
So the turnaround time is generally 8 months to a year, depending on how much editing is involved with the book. It could be faster than that. If the book is sort of ready to go, it doesn't take a whole lot of time to get it formatted and designed and uploaded and everything. But the heart of the process is collaboration between whichever one of us is editing the book, Julia or me, and the author. In Cheryl's case, we Zoom frequently, regularly. right?
Yeah,
Going
for
over, going
For
over
years.
chapters, reading them back and forth, you know, so there's a very involved process in, I would say, helping the author to realize his or her voice, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where all the good stuff happens. It's not following on the time frame that I wanted it to, but every time I let it go farther, it gets deeper, and I'm like, oh my God, of course. So cutting it short early is just, it's not allowing it to grow to its full potential. So this process of having access to the process has just been, it's what it is. It's what makes the magic.
As far as cost, that depends too on sort of what we see as the length of the editing process. But for a new author coming to us at this point, probably $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to you know, cover all of the editing time, which is considerable, and then that also covers the costs of you know, getting the book formatted and all that, and then we split the split all the revenue 50-50. That may sound like a lot of money, but the amount of time that a professional editor is spending with your book, many hours that, you know, once that fee is agreed upon are then kind of not on the clock, you know, it becomes a labor of love. You know, I think that, you know, if you were to go to a traditional publishing company, they wouldn't pay out in advance because they really don't do that anymore for anybody but the authors at the top. You wouldn't have that upfront cost, but you'd have probably at least 2 years of waiting time because they're already looking at their lists for 2024 of the books that they're going to publish. And you would have the challenge of even getting them to notice. You know, if you don't have an agent, they're probably not going to know. When I started working at Random House in the late 80s, I was reading what was called the slush pile, or, you know, came in over the transom. It was unsolicited manuscripts, stuff that authors who didn't have agents just sent in, hoping that the company would publish them. And the only books that my bosses, the editors, really took seriously and read themselves were things that came from agents. There was this one agency called Curtis Brown, and they had these bright orange manuscript boxes. So it was very distinctive. You knew when something came in the door, delivered by messenger, a bright orange box, it was from Curtis Brown, and, you know, the editors got all excited about that.
I just want to add a little thought here. So each person that comes to us is different. In your case, you have 200 pages probably already done, and I imagine you've spent a lot of time, or maybe you don't, but you know, some people come with a completed manuscript. Some people just come with an idea. Some people come with like a vision. For example, Mike and I, when we met, he had a vision long before he met me that he would be able to tell his story of becoming a recovered quadriplegic. And by the time he met me, he'd wanted to do this for 40 years. And when we started talking, we realized we had a common vision of seeing it on the screen as well as in book form. But really his first vision was the big vision of, you know, seeing it as a movie that anybody could watch all over the world. And it was after we wrote the script that we started to do it kind of backwards and then start to move to the memoir. And, you know, Mike at first was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna do it again, but then we realized through our relationship, our friendship, through the collaboration on the script, that there are so many things that you can't put in a film. So much backstory. And also when you've been through something that's traumatic, your mind doesn't remember it always in a linear fashion. So after I would complete a major part of the script, something might come up that we forgot to put in it because you know, it came to him later. So I had all this extra material, and I wanted to use it and expand it and make his memoir, and then also in the film industry, everybody's packaging scripts with books, and that's how it works. So you just never know how it's going to go. You could come to us with some poems. You could come with a sci-fi novel. It doesn't have to just be, you know, in a simple little box. And we can work from just the germ of an idea, or we can work with like a completed concept. And you don't have to feel like you're, you know, a polished writer. You may never have really written since you were maybe a kid in school and you did something creative there, but you just really wish you could. So Tom and I, we're really good at taking somebody at any point in their journey, and our goal is to actually teach them as we go, so that they're not dependent upon us. So that, for example, I know that when Tom works with Cheryl, that he reads her chapters back to her. And when you hear somebody reading your story to you, you hear it in a different way. And it strengthens you to understand how to edit your own work. And so as you go through this process and you're by yourself writing something, and you read it aloud to yourself, you start to hear the things that you were learning with us. And so the goal is not just to publish, but it's to help you come into your full voice, to learn the craft, to feel empowered. And I don't know if Cheryl, you want to add?
That's our goal is not just to make better books, but to make better writers. Because I mean, in addition to being publishers and editors, you know, we're both writing teachers. But you know, this is very true with Cheryl, who, you know, in the beginning of the process, I would be pointing out to you, you know, this sentence is a little. Now she is pointing out. She's saying, Tom, I'm not happy with this sentence. You know, it's not. And you know, I think it's fair to say you are a much better writer than when we started. I mean, you were a good writer when we started, but you're a much better writer.
I sat down at the Westport Writers Workshop and I said, I don't belong here. My face was red and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm sitting here. And Tom's like, no, everyone who writes is a writer. And I was like, oh, I don't know about that. So it was just, it's been a process of perseverance, but what would happen is as I would see something happen on the page, I would, oh my gosh, and I would be enthralled by it. And every time I tried to push it away in a life that really had no space for this, you know, mother of 3 kids, working full-time, working in medical industry where it's just been wild, the joy would keep coming back to me. I would try to push it away and it would keep coming back. So allowing a process where you have to move differently and feel differently, that's what artistry is, and putting that into the world that we live, where we need to get to doctor's appointments, we have to care for the people around us, we have to feed everybody, we have to pay our bills. It is how do you find that haven to let its artistry grow in the way it has to grow, and it needs to be given its time and not have the pressures. So that's what I feel that this setup allowed me to have a foot in the door, access to absolutely excellent editing and processing, and a structure there that could happen when a real life is going on. So yeah, just keep going if you're out there and you're thinking about it and you're like, oh, this is not perfect. I was absolutely far worse off than any one of you, to start with. Yes.
Yeah, a quick question for you. In terms of the spectrum of being self-published and being published and being published with your group, on the imprint of something that Amazon prints out, it says at the very bottom, imprint independently published. In other words, Amazon is not the publisher of this book. It would
Right.
be.
So,
And my question is, some, I'm thinking of alumni magazines, will publish a review of this book, you know, college alumni magazine, I'm thinking of Yale and Harvard in particular, but they say, send me the book, we want to see it physically, and then they secondly say, at least Yale says, we rarely publish independently published book. We rarely write a review. This is for a free review. It's not one of the ads that some magazines have where you pay $600 and get an ad. This is their editors write a review of your book. So my question is, if this book came out of your press, would it say independently published, or would it have your publishing company?
It will say Christmas Lake Press.
Christmas Lake?
And the back-end reason for that is that we purchase the ISBN number, or the barcode number for the book, and we register that number to our press. And then when we put the book up on Amazon, Amazon recognizes it as coming from Christmas Lake Press. Independently published means that the author of that book allows Amazon to assign the ISBN number and create the barcode and all of that. And that's just why that ends up there. So to answer your question, everything we publish on the copyright page says published by Christmas
Have
Lake
any of
Press.
the books that you published ended up in the sort of free review section of either the Yale or Harvard alumni magazine?
Not yet. I am working with an author from Yale. I'm a graduate myself, and I'm working with a guy who's 6 years behind me on a novel, and we are expecting it certainly to be reviewed in the alumni magazine, especially since the novel is set at Yale in the 90s.
Well, I hope the expectation comes true, but their turnaround rate is not very high. Acceptance rate isn't very high.
So
I have a question. I have what is a completed book, and I have two books that were published. My background's in journalism. The first one was nonfiction. One was done by a hybrid press that ended up moving into something else. So then I'd written another book, and I was just too tired to try to go get an agent or whatever, and I was like, I'm just going to put it out there. And then the pandemic hit and everything, and I was like, I haven't dealt with it. So it's published, I would give it to you, you could decide. I hired a professional editor. You could decide if you think it's been done well. And then do you take books like that I just didn't deal, and I just was like, okay, eventually I will have time to try to like do something with this.
you mean something that you put out there yourself?
It's
but-
already out there,
Right.
yeah, and I mean, I could change the title of it, obviously, if that's something that you would need in order to take on a new client. And then, of course, I'd be open to editing, but you may think it's just fine, I just,
So yes, we will take a book that an author has put out there, because Amazon, just as easy it is to put your book up, you can take it down and make it unavailable through that channel. It does help if it has a different title, different cover, so that everything sort of looks a little different. But that's the beauty of being small and flexible.
and then you'd be open to promoting it,
Sure.
because that's what I would be interested
Mhm.
in. And then what do you do in relation to trying to sell it like to screen? How does that work?
Well, first I'd have to read it
Of course.
and evaluate it, not just by myself, but with you, whether it fits as a feature film or as a TV series of some kind. Once you and I figure that out, it's a matter of, it's really kind of what you want. I mean, I can even teach people how to write a script. It's a whole different process. So if you're the kind of person that really has a strong visual sense of how they want their story told and wants to learn how to do it themselves, I can come alongside that way. The other way is I really get inside your head. I talk to you extensively about all your characters, the world. We look at, let's say it's going to be a film. I would have you go look at different films that you feel capture the mood, the vision that you have. And then when I really feel like I understand what you want, then I start to cross it to film. And then after we've, say, accomplished writing a script that's a feature film or a TV pilot, then there's a lot of other steps that happen. For example, if it's a TV pilot, then you have to think about the entire series. there's a lot, it would be a lot to explain right here,
Mhm.
but to try to sum it up quickly,
So
it's.
you can go do basically what you're talking about, but do it, the screenwriting, not just novel publishing.
Yes,
Mhm.
and it's either I would do it completely myself, but trying to capture what you want, and then you would look at it and say, yeah, that's it, or, like, for example, when I worked with Mike, I was taking his own life story, so I would say to him, well, what would your dad say here? And he'd say, he would kind of say it like this, like, oh, and then I'd put that down. I know I'm getting it right when he says, oh my gosh, I feel like that really was my dad, or, you know, things like that happen, and then I know I'm on the money. So after we've developed it as a script, then comes the whole shopping of the project, and it's a whole nother thing. But I have a lot of different doorways and relationships in the industry, and I'd be able to help shepherd it, hopefully through to traction. There's no guarantees in the industry, but I would probably be able to get it somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
How long have you been in business? And again, would you describe your biggest success in terms of number of copies of books sold?
We've been, well, we started what we call Christmas Lake Creative about 4 years ago, where we began working with writers, editing, coaching. One of the things I do with a number of writers is more really motivational coaching than actual editing, because that's a part of the process too. Sometimes it's combined. We started publishing 2 years ago, so we've published 4 books. We have another, I think, 5 in process right now. I guess the biggest success in terms of copies sold, and we're not going to give out numbers, but is a novel called With You, which is about a woman who ends up creating an artificial intelligence, or is involved with the creation of an artificial intelligence that is based on her, that outlives her after she dies and actually steps in and looks out for her kids and does all sorts of things. And this is really fascinating because there have been a number of articles published in the last year about this very thing. In fact, I just read one, I think it was in the Times maybe, about people having their parents talk to computers and feed in emails and letters and things, and then it creates an AI version of the person, so that after the person is gone, they can have some type of, it's grief tech, basically. So this is kind of a cutting edge book in terms of the topic, and the author's first-time author, great writer. Book did not require that much editing, and it's done pretty well. And then he also he hired somebody to create an audio version of the book, which is done pretty well. And then we created an audio version of Mike's book, which Mike read himself from start to finish, and it has his original music in it. And we helped him through that whole process. We found recording engineers. I'll let Julia talk about that.
Yeah, I want to add right here, because we're talking about the success of the books, but there's also the success of the books becoming a film or a TV series. So with Mike, for example, we got his memoir done, we got his feature film done. Then I said to Mike, because as you get to know your client, you learn all kinds of things. I found out that he's a songwriter. And that's pretty amazing, since he's a recovered quadriplegic. He can play guitar and do all the things he used to do. So I was thinking, how do we bring all of Mike, every aspect of him, into a film pitch? So I said to Mike, let's go in the studio, because I'm also a professional violinist. I said, let's go in the studio. Let's get the best producer. So I got a Grammy-nominated producer. We went into the studio, and this was really fun for Mike, and I'll have him talk a tiny bit about it, that like he was able to record his songs. He wrote at 17, really develop them further, And why am I doing that? Yes, it's great to have them, it's fun to show, you know, your family and your friends, but it's gonna go in a pitch. It's gonna go along with a pitch deck, it's gonna go along with the book. And now Mike's project is going to a company called Zero Gravity Management. We have a shopping agreement, and we're taking his project there. And we're also taking another book, an author that I met, because Tom had this client first, her name's Risa. And I got to know her from Tom, and as she started to develop her writing chops, she said, you know, I really want to make a film or a TV show. So then she was crossed over to me, and it's just taken off like wildfire. Now that project's also going to Zero Gravity, and I already know that they're interested. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I know for a fact they're interested in it, and that got her so excited that now she's writing the second book to help us do season 2. So it just kind of, when you talk about like what is the success, like what do we, it's sort of like a snowball effect. I mean, we've just started, but it's picking up speed, and you know, talk to us a year from now, and hopefully I'll be able to say, hey, let's, you know, Mike's film is, you know, greenlit, or, you know, Risa's TV show is, you know, you can go see it on Netflix or Amazon. But that's my dream.
And you know, a measure of success also is the satisfaction of the author, the completion of the book, the releasing of the work of art into the world, and being happy with that. I mean, I think, you know, in Cheryl's case, I know, you know, Cheryl's book is it's a message. I call it a message-driven book for 2 reasons. One, it has a very important message about our aging population, because Cheryl works with people in our aging population. But it's also message-driven in that it was kind of downloaded into your head, right? I mean, this book just came to you. So I think getting this book out into the world, right? Just that step alone. I mean, of course, we want it to sell lots of copies, and I think it will. But that's going to be huge, right?
All right, just to be able to put my head on the pillow and go to sleep and not feel like I have something else on the back of my head is going to be amazing. But the reality is that I am a task person. I want results, and I want things to be absolutely excellent. So what happens is you are in a cycle until you get something that you're happy with. And we're right there. I can feel it because that's it, we are there. And that's an incredible feeling, and it's incredible to read, and it makes you just be like, that I'm totally behind it. Along the way, my mind has been like, well, dollars and cents, how is this going to work out? And I've been in that equation and struggled with that equation and what happens, and I had to put it down and just say, you're either going to go for it, or you have to either think differently and let this have its space, or you're not. So what is being produced is absolutely worth every single hour of my lack of sleep, because again, it's been why all through my 40s this has just been an exhausting ride. But worth it, of course, because that's what my brain keeps going back to it. I'm driving in the car, I'm feeding the kids, I'm at work, you name it, and it'll just switch back into these thoughts. That's where the Google Doc comes in, because you got to keep this stuff alive, you got to get it down, and then you got to go. And when you have an hour and you're sitting there at a kid's game, write. Whenever you can, just keep writing if that's in you. So this process has been a way to do something and get to the absolute level when it goes out there. It is what it exactly was supposed to be, and the inception of an idea of an artist who was not ready to accept that they were an artist and to go full throttle into it. And it's great. I'm very excited. But you gotta stay in your lane, and you can't get too excited about things. You must stay focused on the work and not the dollars and cents, because it's maddening, and it takes away from what the true artistry is.
Let me just jump in on here, and I'm going to tell you a little about my story with Julia and Tom. It was when I came to them, we first went after a screenplay, And then after we get the screenplay done, she said, we need a book. I said, oh my gosh. Wow, book. So we started with the book. But Julie and Tom, they take it on, they take the horses by the reins, and they control it. They dug deep into my story. They found out things from my sister. She was a big part of my recovery. Things that I was never told, because they did not want me to get any negative feeling in my recovery until I was that far gone. Because I want to put this number out for you. Like, over 98% of the people who had the type of injury I had, their next step was the graveyard. So I'm part of the minus less than 2% of recovery. And that's when it dawned on me, I wanted to get this story out. Because I was in high school, I wanted to be part of the crowd. Hey, I'm cool. But I was walking in other people's shadows. I was walking in my friends' shadows. And I live by this now. Don't walk in other people's shadows. And like, shoot for the sun in everything you do. Because even if you miss, you're the number of stars, and that is a great place to be. As of right now, I'm dancing in those stars because I just stuck my nose to the grindstone. I got better. I recovered through my parents and all the numerous people who helped me in my recovery. But I just wanted to get this story out. And they became good friends, Tom and Julia. Our friendship, we joke around a lot on the story. Because as Julia said, she'd say, what about this? And it would just dawn on me like, oh yeah, it's like I had a brain fracture, and the doctor, on a scale of 1 to 10, they gave it like a 15 from the accident, because it was like we were traveling in a Triumph GT6 coming down Vista, New York. My friend was driving over 100 miles an hour. I tell him, use choice language, slow the car down. Hits the brakes lock, hits the gears lock. We skidded across the street, heading for a pile of dirt and a big black shadow. I just, out of reaction, my legs on the dashboard to brace myself. We hit the pile of dirt within the black shadow. The black shadow was a bulldozer. They don't move. From the headlight on the driver's side, the hinges, it was pushed in. If I didn't put my legs on the dashboard, I would have lost both legs at the socks, the doctor said. And the story of the book tells this complete story of how I was flying high, I was flying very low at one point, I wasn't even flying, and my recovery coming back into the sunlight. And I want to help this Christmas Lake Press. They were godsend to me because they helped me out in every area I needed help in and more. I love these guys.
Me too, Mike. Other questions, thoughts? Sure.
Well, I almost can't ask a question after that. That's really an amazing story. But my question is, I wanted to know if you have considered or doing any middle grade novels or anything like that.
We are actually publishing one fairly soon, set in the 1790s, sort of early post-colonial America, about a young girl. Julia actually did the editing on that book, and I would say that's middle grade, basically.
Definitely middle grade, and I think young girls will really like it. I had a lot of fun working on it. The author, is she in her 80s?
She's 84.
Yeah. She was really fun to work with. I mean, this was a passion piece for her.
She spent about 10 years working on the book. It started out with her finding something out about a relative, and then she went on this whole genealogical expedition and started writing about this time period that was fascinating. She researched it and created these characters. So.
And I already soft pitched it to a company that is a perfect fit for it, so I have a feeling that we haven't put it out yet, but once we publish it, I'll be able to pitch it to this company. And also, I think Mike's book, I guess I kind of wrote it in a really simple, straightforward style that I was hoping maybe like a 15-year-old boy that plays baseball would like, and I actually sent it to some of my girlfriend's kids that are around that age, and they really liked it. In fact, one boy who was a pitcher was so into Mike. I mean, he even made like a pumpkin that said the big one. So that's his nickname. So, I mean, and my own son, who's 26 now, met Mike and met him at a dark time in his life when he was sort of in the shadows, and meeting Mike and hearing his story got him out of those shadows and reactivated him as an actor and a creative person. And so he's the one that actually oversaw his audiobook and went into the studio and spent, I can't even tell you how many hours getting that done, because he was so drawn to Mike and his story. So, you know, if you have something for a younger age group, I think it's great. I mean, we impact young people. I love it.
Thank you.
I just had something in here, and just about the audiobook. The audiobook is like up here. I really had to shoot for this, because when I came out, I did this audiobook, and I'm glad I did it. I read the whole book. I had nobody coming in and say anything else. I read from the beginning to the end, because when I came out of the coma, I couldn't even, all I could do was cry. I couldn't make a sound or anything. I was a quadriplegic. I was 6'6" and 66 pounds.
Ooh.
And 17 years old. And
That's why I wanted him to do the audiobook, because that's a comeback. And only Mike can tell his story with that kind of passion. You hear it in his voice on the audiobook. And we put his songs on the audiobook.
Yeah, a lot of creativity involved. And Cheryl's book, by the way, is called Where the Light is Brighter. It will be coming out soon, or next year.
No.
And it's like, oh, wait.
No, it's gotta go. So,
It also has a great cover.
It has a beautiful cover. Again, as part of this collaborative process, you know, we found and hired a professional cover designer who's done some New York Times best-selling covers, and that was fun, right? And the back and forth.
Great.
She created a mood board. You know, do you like these colors? Do you like these other book covers and things?
It's on your website.
Yes, it is on the website.
Is.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
And cover is so important,
Yeah.
because if you are gonna cross to film, it's like you're branding your concept with your cover. If you think of your cover like it's a poster for the film version of your story, think of it that way. And I like to work with authors, not just picking a cover for them, but, you know, having them be part, like, you know, Cheryl was,
Oh, it's a process.
so part of that.
Yeah, and I think that it was, again, in this life where we're all living, there was time to make it what it needed to be. So Tom would bring it back and say, okay, this is what Nicole's thinking, and we would go through all of this, and what an amazing process. It just allows for the creativity to grow. Creativity, it wasn't, you know, you're not even aware of, and so it was wonderful. Yeah.
And Mike's cover got a recognition and an award, so, yeah. And as I go to do the pitch deck for his film, we'll probably enhance that and add a lot more images that could go along with the book when people Google it.
Real quick question, on any submission, just to know, do you acknowledge the submission, or do we figure, okay, after 3-4 months, you know, we move on here?
Oh, we acknowledge it.
Oh, okay.
Again, we're very small, so, you know, anything we receive, we will acknowledge it, thank you for sending it in, and give you a time frame in terms of how long it will be for us to read it and then get back to you.
Thank you.
And also, we understand how frustrating it is to wait for something. So.
Thank you all. Great questions. Thanks for helping to make this more interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.